Buenas noches a todos, bienvenidos a Gol sin etiquetas, este especial de Navidad. Les avisamos, este no es un programa en directo, es un programa pregrabado. Y bueno, este va a ser, es el pequeño regalo de Navidad de Larry y mío hacia todo el público de Gol sin etiquetas, que fielmente nos sigue todos los lunes. Y obviamente hoy, día de Navidad y siendo lunes, pues no podíamos fallaros. Además, que estoy seguro que estáis ya todos hasta las narices de reuniones familiares y demás, y deseando desconectar y poner la tele y tener una excusa pues para iros a la habitación, a una habitación aparte y bueno, hablar un poco de lo que nos gusta y de lo que nos une, que es este gran deporte que es el golf. Buenas noches, Larry, y feliz Navidad.
Buenas noches, Gonzalo. No diremos cuándo lo estamos grabando, pero sí, nos lanzamos a por un especial de Navidad interesante, distinto. Ahora veremos por qué. Y para mí con un invitado que no solo da mucho juego, sino que es de conversación muy interesante. O sea que vamos a ver lo que sacamos de hoy.
Exacto. Y como decimos, esperamos que después de haber hecho todas las compras de Navidad, por supuesto, en Castellana Golf, cómo son los regalos de golf de Navidad, ¿eh? Qué bonito es cuando acierta y cómo es eso, esa tía cuando eras pequeño que te regalaba la típica mierda de golf que no servía absolutamente para nada, ¿sabes? Como el limpiabolas o el cuentagolpes. Esas cosas que como jugabas al golf te regalaban la típica cañaña de golf que acababa en el armario y nunca usabas. Pero no, en Castellana Golf solo hay cosas de máxima calidad y así que espero que todas las compras hayan sido puntualmente hechas en sus diferentes tiendas, sea la de Castellana, la de Golf Park o la del RACE. Aquí Pinedín, que nos brinda sus ofertas. Larry, hoy programa especial de en tanto en cuanto es el programa de Navidad y sobre todo que eso va a ser nuestra primera incursión en el mundo anglosajón, va a ser nuestra primera entrevista en inglés. ¿Cómo va tu inglés, Larry? ¿Está oxidadete? ¿Está bien? ¿Cómo te ves?
Ahí es un tema ahí que ahora veremos muy bien cómo está el asunto, porque me da que está peor que mi approach, pero bueno, oye, hablaremos en indio después de toda la gran educación que me ofrecieron mis padres y no sé, ya veremos lo que pasa. Y yo siempre que cuando me fui a estudiar a Estados Unidos me hacía toda la gracia hablar como lo más cercano al español posible en cuanto a acento y ahí se me quedó. La verdad que mi inglés es bastante cutre en ese sentido, pero bueno, hace la función.
Bueno, yo creo que sobreviviremos. Lo que tenemos hoy con nosotros es un invitado súper interesante. Yo creo que es bueno, aparte obviamente de un gran jugador, es de esas personas que da gusto cuando las entrevistan. Por supuesto es un must, es un follow en Twitter fundamental. Porque como digo, siempre tiene cosas interesantes que decir, es un tío inteligente, es un tío que además habla muy bien en público, me recuerda en ese aspecto mucho a John Ram, es un tío que delante del micrófono se viene arriba y además es un podcaster como nosotros, así que yo creo que sin más vamos a darle la bienvenida al 2 veces ganador del DP World, Eddie Pepperell. Welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me, guys. I didn't understand a great deal of the last few minutes, but I assume you've said nice things.
We did say very nice things indeed, and actually we were talking about your podcast. I mean, you're actually doing. I mean, we've got some competition here. You've got your own podcast going on, the Chipping Forecast, which I had the pleasure of listening a couple of times, and I think it's great fun. I mean, is it very different? I mean, the playing golf professionally. I mean, you've always been good in front of microphones, but how is it having your own show?
It's fairly easy with the two guys that I do it with. You know, Ian Carter and Andrew Cotter are both very experienced, been in TV and radio for years, and know the game far better than I do, actually. So, you know, obviously as a player, I bring in a different type of insight and perspective, and I think that adds some value. But each in our own way, I think we add value, and I enjoy recording every week. So it's really no hassle at all.
Absolutely. From here, I mean, we truly recommend. I mean, for the English listeners here in Golf Sin Etiquetas, definitely it's a must. I mean, there's two musts here. You should follow Eddie on Twitter, It's always great fun following him, and he always has witty and smart things to say, and with that English or British sense of humor, which I like so much. And of course, as the podcast, the chipping forecast. I mean, it's definitely one that would be on your list. Well, Eddie, I mean, a lot has been going on the last few weeks, as you know. I mean, in Spain here, we're still a bit in shock of the news of John Ram going to leave. I mean, the rumors have been there for quite a while, but I have to say that in the last few weeks they were a little stronger. They had a bit more consistency to it than in the past. I mean, what's your take on John doing what I can tell? It's been a huge move to live.
Yeah, it is. It's it's quite possibly and probably the biggest acquisition that Liv have made so far. In their 2-year existence, I think it's fair to say, and it's a real. It's a shot to the PGA Tour for sure. This is a big loss for the PGA Tour and probably the DP World Tour. I will be interested to see how they react to this. One would imagine that they might have to go a little easy on the rules with John, especially as it relates to playing in his home event in Spain. So I suspect some rules may change, and that's just a suspicion. I have no insight there genuinely, but speculating, I suspect things will change a little bit with the DP World Tour in terms of their actions towards John and maybe other Liv players as a consequence of this. So the ramifications are probably quite far-reaching. Listen, as you guys probably well know, I'm not Liv's biggest fan. So it's, of course, I'm disappointed in it because I think that John, I would rather watch John play on the PGA Tour full time and the DP World Tour when he does play. So I've not really been one to tune in and watch Liv golf, and I don't think that John signing with Liv will actually change that for me. This has been one of the interesting things for me, actually, that I've realized in the last 2 years. I'm a huge fan of Sergio Garcia, Henrik Stenson, some of my very favorite players playing on Liv, and yet I haven't watched. And it's kind of identified to me that actually I was less maybe a follower of the golfer as much as I was the tour, the event, and the background and the history that underpins where we all play. And again, I just think that John's signing to Liv won't really make any difference to me personally. I won't be watching Liv as a consequence of John signing, but ultimately it's sad that I love watching John play golf, as we all do, and I'm sure many will follow him across the Liv, but I suspect many won't either.
Eddie, let's go one step at a time. What would you do if you were the commissioner of the European Tour? What would you do with this issue? Would you change rules now? So nothing for Sergio, nothing for Henrik, nothing for anybody. Now that John moves, would you do anything different about Ryder Cup, playing opportunities in Europe? What would you do if you were the CEO?
Well, we can. I mean, let's step back a little. I mean, I think the news were shocking for everyone, but I was very surprised with Rory's approach. I mean, Rory, who's been quite, let's say, strict when it came to the Liv players playing Ryder Cup, and as soon as Ram made the move, all of a sudden Rory kind of changing the approach and saying, hey, we should probably be making changes because we do need John at Bethpage in 2025. I mean, do you think those changes are actually going to happen, or I mean, where do you see this going?
I don't know that the Ryder Cup qualification process needs to actually change a great deal. Obviously Luke had 6 picks this time around, and I don't see that changing. I just think that one of those picks will be used for John, but equally he could quite well qualify via the majors. It's going to be interesting, obviously, to see if he incurs fines and sanctions the way that all of the other players obviously have done up until this point. And of course, the names that were mentioned there just by Alex, I don't know this situation exactly with all of them in terms of the fines that they owed and whether they have paid them or not. But obviously, I know the resignation of a number of players was due to the fact that they haven't paid the fines and they're not prepared to go on continually paying fines, which is understandable. So I do suspect that there might well be a different approach from the DP World Tour moving forward. And I also suspect that this kind of framework agreement, quote unquote, kind of opens up there being a possibility to that happening, simply because there is that distinct point in time where you could make the argument that it is reasonable to start putting in place slightly different rules based on this agreement that we're supposedly trying to work towards. So I think there's a way out into some degree for Keith Pelley and the executive at the tour to kind of come up with something. But I'm not privy to those decisions, and I don't know what's going to happen. But I think John's inclusion of the Ryder Cup really isn't going to be affected in any way, shape or form. And I think he could simply just be used as a pick in this case. I still wouldn't expect any Ryder Cup points or of the like, or world ranking points to start being issued to Live Golf as a consequence of John's move.
No, definitely not. I don't see the world ranking point thing is definitely going to be an issue going forward, unless they change the format. I think it's either moving to 72 holes and probably establishing a cut. Because I mean they are doing steps on the right direction. Actually, I mean Larry and myself, we were 2-3 weeks ago. We were in Abu Dhabi playing all those promotion events to get into Live. So now I mean there is a relegation system and a way to get in. So I think they're doing small steps on that direction, and that will happen maybe, but not. I don't see that in that happening, probably not this year, unless they change that format into 72 holes and probably establishing a cut. But what I do see, I mean, people are making like a big deal of John moving, but I mean, my personal opinion is, of course, that other than the money, which of course is always very appealing, I have the feeling that John have more information on the table of how the negotiations are going, and I have the feeling myself that this might the John moving is gonna probably make that get together or that agreement is gonna probably happen sooner than later. That's my feel. I think because John, to be honest, he's been always very. I mean, at the beginning, he was very not. I would not. I'm gonna say against left, but I mean he was defending his position on the PGA Tour. But I think on a way, the last few months, I think he feel betrayed. Probably the same feeling we all players had, especially the ones that I mean stayed loyal to the different tours. But you can see there was a change on the tone, and probably the most conciliating player of all is probably been John. So my gut tells me that he's gonna try and get the tours together, because I think that's probably the best, not only for the game, but at the end for the golf fans, who are the ones who are losing. And I think the ones that lost the most on all this battle between the Saudis and the PGA Tour is probably the golf fans. I mean, as we are. I mean, we made this program because we are golf fans, and we wanted to be in touch with the golf fans and talking about golf, which is what we like. And as for now, I think the only tournaments that got benefited with all this are the majors. Other than that, I mean, everybody's losing.
Yeah. Well, I agree with that, and I'm not convinced that this makes a deal more likely in the near term, for a number of different reasons. It might well make it more likely in the medium term, but I would imagine that would come with consequences for John and or Liv, in part of the agreement. I mean, obviously, I'm assuming that John's deal is, the other side of it to the money is that he has to play 14 Liv events, or certainly close to 14 times. And obviously, once you add in the 4 majors, we all know John doesn't play more than 20, 22 times a year. And this has always been the issue, the whole journey through, right? This thing, we were all three of us very keenly aware that it was difficult in professional golf to exist with just 2 major tours and fulfill the commercial needs and the players' needs in that environment. You chuck a 3rd tour in there, which obviously is what Liv is. And, to me, it was clearly never going to just work. There was always going to be this kind of division, this power battle. That isn't unusual. We should have always suspected that. And I can't see a resolution to that yet. I really can't. And I don't think John's signing makes that resolution any clearer to me. In fact, I would argue the opposite. Reason being because he's gone for $500 million or $400 million. I mean, he's up to the number, and I made this point on Twitter. If he had have gone for $50 million this would have been a very different story. You know, if Liv was this successful entity, I think you don't need to pay people $500-400 million to go. They'll go for a lot less. And he's still lifted the bar. You know, the price of acquiring a player is going up and up at Liv. It's not going down and down. And I think while that is happening, any other top player is going to be demanding huge sums of money to go across. And also the other side to that is any sort of compensation or equalizing fund that has to be put in place on the PGA Tour. Rory McIlroy and all of these guys, Jordan Spieth, they're going to want to be remunerated to a similar degree. They're not stupid. They know they're not going to get $400 million because the PGA Tour can't afford to. But the fact that John has been paid such a large amount, I think, on the other side, is going to change the demands of the Patrick Cantlays and the Xander Schauffele's and the Rory McIlroys of the world. And so, you know, I'm actually less sure that there's going to be an agreement in the near term between all three parties. Of course, I hope something can come together in the future that looks something like what I suspect we all wanted it to look like initially, which was maybe where Liv was a much reduced schedule and maybe replaced the World Golf Championships, and maybe you had 6 tournaments at a certain time in the year and the team element could work. But it had to always be in addition. I do agree with Rory McIlroy when he says that. I do believe that myself. You know, it's about it being an addition. And unfortunately, Liv, obviously, we could discuss the hows and the whys that it came to be that way, but obviously it chose a different path. And so we have this division. So it'll be interesting. I don't know. I'm just speculating again, but yeah, that's how I feel about it.
Yeah, I mean, it's very hard to tell. I mean, we wish we had like a crystal ball where we could see the future. I mean, in an ideal world, it would be great to have, as you said, I mean, players moving freely from tour to tour, and maybe Leaf being kind of that wall part of it, where I mean, you get the Americans to travel the world and play other places. I mean, the likes of Australia, which apparently, I mean, I think for me, I mean, what I've watched of Lift is the tournaments that happen abroad, they seems to be the most successful. I think the first event we had in Valderrama in here in Spain, I think it was big when it comes to crowds. Same the one in Australia. I don't know the one in London. I've never been to the one in London, but I have the feel. I mean, that's kind of the beauty of the live. But I mean, Larry, you can tell us more about it. I mean, you were in the one in Valderrama. Eddie and I, we happened to be at the British Masters at a very interesting player meetings we had there, which we'll talk about. But I mean, how was Live at Valderrama? I mean, what was your take on Live?
Well, I I had mixed feelings. I thought the format a little bit. I don't know how to say. It's too far away from the traditional golf. I'm quite an old-fashioned golf player. I love golf, and I love how it has been through the years, and all this music, all this party stuff makes me feel like the competition level is a little bit down. It's more of a circus than a competition. But you get to see great players through 4 hours and a half. It's flow. It's short. It's nice. But it's hard to follow the competition. Like it's weird. It's a different thing. Mixed feelings. I liked it in some ways, and I really disliked it in some others. I think the format is not yet appropriate for me, at least. What makes you not feeling not watching at all Leaf Golf, Eddie? Is it the format? Is just the way they have been established and the way they do things, or what's going on for you not to watch Leaf Golf whatsoever?
Yeah, no, so I have tried. It's not like I've just out of principle not tried. I did try, and I just simply didn't enjoy the product that was on offer. Now, I should say I don't watch a lot of golf. I mean, for example, only this evening, I tried watching the the father and son championship, and the coverage was dreadful, and I couldn't last more than 10 minutes. So I'm not here saying, you know, that the PGA Tour is all this perfect thing, and so is the DP World Tour, but Live is, you know, this. I don't consume a lot of golf on television anymore, generally speaking, and Live never changed that for me. I think the problem Live has is because of the money that it's putting in, it automatically puts itself on this pedestal, in my opinion. If you're putting that much investment and money into something, what you would expect on the other side of that is a minimum product, a minimum level of something. And to me, it's failed on all of those fronts. And I should say, you know, like yourself, I'm a pretty staunch traditionalist, it turns out, when it comes to golf. You know, I admire so many aspects of professional golf, and I always have done, and I've always been, like us all, on the wrong side at times and on the right side at times, whether that be making a cut by one or missing a cut by one. The pain that feels, you know, there's so much jeopardy that's inherent within professional golf that I actually think drives an enormous amount of respect for professional golfers from everybody else, because professional golf is so unique. The lack of certainty, the unprotection that we have is very unique to golf, but it definitely builds character over time, and great sports people. And we all know how difficult it is to play at the highest level. So, you know, to see Liv just do away with that was something that I've always had a hard time with. And then to see the PGA Tour kind of follow suit was even worse. You know, it's I don't like the general direction that Liv Golf has pulled the game professionally in. That would be my overarching kind of comment on it. And I just hope that, you know, my fear all along has been that the Liv Golf becomes the pinnacle of professional golf, and it's where we see the top 50, 60 guys play outside of the majors, and they can kind of afford to do that. I mean, they're slowly doing it. I'm at this point left wondering why they don't just go the whole way. If they have an unlimited pot of cash, there's a part of me that just wonders now, why don't they just chuck $20-25 billion at this thing? Because they could literally buy the professional game for 3 years, and then they could start to strategically try and offload assets or monetize them in certain ways, build equity, etc. And you know, I don't know that it's got to that point, but I'm left wondering why they don't just do that as a strategy at this point. But that's an aside, really.
Eddie, I have to. I mean, I totally. I mean, I agree with you in some things. I mean, at the time, I thought Live was quite a good thing for golf, because I've always thought that competition was good. I'm a strong believer in competition, and for some time I decided I thought, okay, this is going to kind of shake the tree of the PGA Tour. I mean, they're going to get things going, which they did. I mean, all of a sudden they started raising the prize money, and more importantly for me, it was they opened different ways to access to the PGA Tour, which, let's be honest, it's the biggest tour in the world. So I mean, all of a sudden you could enter. They open like a qualifying school. You could get in through the DP World Tour. Then you had the university program. I mean, so all of a sudden, I mean, it was a great opportunity for young or upcoming players who wanted to get to the highest level. I thought it was good. But then now I'm seeing, I mean, all the money that is being thrown at the players and thrown at golf, and I have to admit I'm a little skeptical, I would say. I mean, I don't think we as golfers, I mean, maybe definitely not myself, but I mean, I don't think we deserve that kind of money. I think the money we're playing for now at golf, it's absurd. I don't know if that's your take as well, how you feel about it. But I mean, I thought we played. Let's go back 2 years ago or 3 years ago. I think we played for more than enough. I mean, players making over $1 million, I mean, on the PGA Tour per week, I mean, for a victory. And now, I mean, I have to say that all this money that's being thrown into the game is just, I think we're getting a little spoiled, aren't we?
Yeah, I agree. I was thinking about this earlier, actually. One of maybe the most egregious examples of this was what just happened with the PIP fund. You know, bear in mind that the PGA Tour, I think, just paid Jon Rahm, correct me if I'm wrong, $9 million just before he signed to Live.
Yeah,
in an effort to keep him.
100 million they had for that program
and they gave 9 to John. Well, $9 million, as far as I am aware, is about what Tiger earned in the mid 2000s when he won like 8 tournaments. And, that's not that long ago. And so you think 15, 16 years on, the same entity, the PGA Tour, is paying the same amount of money to one player just to keep him that Tiger earned with all his great achievements. It's in just the most absurd place, professional golf. Many sports are in a crazy place. Football has obviously been there for a long time with the Premier League. It's not the only... You could frankly call it an asset market. Now you could call it a market because John Rahm is an asset. And this is something that's also different in the same way we consider houses and cars and all of these other material commodities and objects, assets. That's what we've turned golfers into. And I inherently don't like that. And I think sport is, to me anyway, I've always loved the romantic kind of elements of sport, the competition, those moments that it doesn't really matter how much money Tiger Woods was earning when he chipped in on the 16th of Augusta all those years ago. It didn't matter to me how much money he was earning. When I watched him chip in and the ball roll in at the last moment, that was just the most incredible moment in golfing history. He could have earned £10 or £10 million for that chip. It's entirely irrelevant. He's there for the competition and the history. And slowly, well, maybe not that slowly at the moment, but that is being eroded and degraded in professional golf.
Yeah.
And
that's actually a very recurrent question when you play with amateurs in pro-ams and things. I mean, they would ask you, I mean, do you ever think about the money? I mean, and the answer, I would say it's always the same for everybody. I mean, I would say for 99% of the players would be the same, and it's no. I mean, you're never thinking about the money when you're playing. I mean, you're thinking about making that putt. I mean, it's going to be a costly putt. I mean, you know that shot might be dear or not, but you're never thinking about the money as such. I mean, and I saw an interview of Rahm. I mean, I think right before the Tour Championship. I mean, those, which is now when they get to spread all that FedEx money on that very last tournament. And he was saying the same thing. I think we as professional golfers, yes, we do play for money. That's what we do. That's what we, especially the ones that are not playing for history, because I agree there's a bunch of guys that they're playing to actually make a spot for themselves in kind of the history books. But the rest, which is 98% or more of the professional players, we're just playing to make a living. And money is definitely an issue, but we're not thinking about the money when we're playing, are we?
Yeah, well, I would say there have been moments in my career where I have thought about the money. I've had putts on the 18th green or the 72nd hole where I know I can't win the tournament, but I'm in a high-ish position, and I know there's a lot on it. And
there's a lot at stake, but you're not thinking how much this is going to cost me if I don't make it.
No, I don't know how much,
but it's behind your. It's there somewhere behind your back.
Yeah, but it can act as a motivating factor, and I wouldn't ever say that money isn't important or that people shouldn't strive to earn more money at all. I mean, that's not my point, but my point is that the game of golf we've derived it to a place where it's only about money. And that's the issue. And that's the thing that's slightly new, I think, in golf. And it's something that I find just quite toxic and corrosive over time. Money doesn't hold those intrinsic, we're not connected to the same way we are competition and the historic values of competition. And that is what the tours, the two traditional major tours are built on. So, Alex, you look like you have something to say.
No, what it's a little bit scary to me is that Live Golf has put the professional golf in a place that is not sustainable, and maybe is for them for a while because they have unlimited amounts of money, but you need to keep your market sustainable, and PGA Tour right now is not sustainable, and obviously Live Golf isn't either. So the thing is that they are exploding the market, and they won't be able to hold this forever, because you cannot spend millions times what you earn, and what is going to happen is that if they explode the market and they keep growing the money spending in this way, we might get to a point that there's no coming back point, and in 10, 15, 20 years, this might be a big issue for professional golf, because PGA Tour will not be able to hold this growth for sure. It's not sustainable. you don't sell the product for what you are spending. So it's quite scary for me in the long term, obviously.
Yeah. No, I agree, and also what worries me is that the only money we eventually have to fall back on is the Saudi money. I think that's what's going to be interesting about if there is any agreement, the governance structure and the legals behind that in terms of ownership rights. That's going to be very interesting to see because, I think what's new about this, what's new about the Saudi and the PIF money into professional golf, which hasn't really existed in any other sport as far as I'm aware up until this point, is that they've only ever bought this team or that team, and they've never had a full kind of ownership of a sport legally, put it that way. And I think with what's being potentially proposed, or what may or may not be proposed with the new agreement and the new NewCo company, as it was so called, the legal kind of structure to that is something that I think will be interesting. I would be cautious about giving them too much, legal power, frankly, because at this point they have the money, but that's not to say in 10 years they're going to have the money. I said this recently on another podcast, seemingly doing podcasts all the time at the moment, but it's, 30 years ago, it may have been the Russians that had the money, and then it was the Chinese, and it's the Japanese, and, money moves around the globe all the time. And we're right now, they are taking advantage of the cash pile they have, but that cash pile won't be forever. And so what does sustain, however, through time, and the PGA Tour, an example of this, are institutions and organizations that are fundamentally built on foundational principles like competition, and they hold values with them, and they have long-standing sponsors that grow with them. The companies like Rolexes, the BMWs, the FedExes, these types of companies, they're built over, they are decade-long partnerships. And so I'm curious to see how the next few years unfold, and I hold your concerns as well, Alex. I carry the same concerns.
Yeah, and then it's I think is the time to talk about leadership, because that's those are the guys in charge of bringing those sponsorship and keeping those companies happy. We've seen in the last few weeks, I think Wells Fargo has pulled out of the sponsorship of the PGA Tour. I think 2024 is going to be their very last season, and apparently they're asking for a lot of money now with all these designated or elevated events. I forgot about the name, but it's a lot to ask for a sponsor. To ask them for such big amounts of money, where they have to cover all the prize money and so on. Just for a week of golf and TV exposure. And I think when we talk about leadership, we can probably, I think one of the factors that might have pushed John Ram away, I think maybe was that, I'm not going to say lack of leadership, but definitely a kind of a feel of betrayal, which a lot of players have had. It's hard for me to speak on behalf of the PGA Tour players because I haven't been there for quite a while, but I know on the European Tour, I wouldn't like to be on Keith Pelly's shoes, don't get me wrong, or in Jay Monahan's. I think it's been really difficult times these last 2-3 years in golf. They've been absolutely crazy, and I would have never have like to be on their shoes, and they're in a very difficult position. But yeah, I have the feeling that some players are definitely feel that betrayal, and so especially what I'm feeling lately is that a kind of a lack of communication. I don't know if you have that same feel, but it's as if we are members of organization, and both are, and as they say, there's been a lack of communication and information, and I would like to have your thoughts on that.
Yeah, well, on that latter point, I agree 100%. In fact, that has been a topic that I've brought up a number of times in the last 12 months when I was on the committee. I brought it up regularly that I felt the communication between management and how it filtered down was just not good enough. And there are too many players left in the dark as to exactly what's going on. These are pivotal moments in our history. There's a lot going on, and I do think the players have a genuine interest, as well as a right, obviously, to know what's going on. Now, I do understand that Keith's there to do a job, as is Jay, and there's stuff that needs to be remained private and to some degree. and you can't relay all the information, and he's a very busy guy. But I do think that there needed to be better communication throughout this period. I would agree entirely with that. And in terms of the wider leadership, listen, I also agree that I wouldn't want to be in their shoes either. When you're in a position of leadership like Jay Monahan was, he could have acted preemptively years and years ago. But any success that he would have had in acting preemptively, there's a sort of asymmetric risk reward to that. When you act preemptively and something doesn't happen because of your actions, nobody really remembers. And so you don't really get any of the rewards. Whereas if you don't act, then obviously, or if you do act, but it's not enough, which is probably what we've seen, then obviously all of the risk is at your shoulders. And I think what we have seen Jay unfortunately do is when he has acted preemptively, it hasn't been enough. And it's unfortunately been made him to look a bit like a fool. And I think the PIP money is an example of that. And arguably he didn't act preemptively enough when he should have done. And that's probably going back 2 or 3 years' time when the conversation should have been had. So for me, there are two kind of key moments in Jay Monahan in the last few years for the PGA Tour. And that is that, well, first and foremost, there wasn't a conversation had initially, obviously, with LIV and with the Saudis to fully understand what they're trying to do, to understand this 2030 vision. Because for the Saudis, this is more than just golf. This is a geopolitical vision. This is a very grand vision that they have, and golf is just a small part of it. And I think that if Jay didn't know that, then that's he should have done. He should have. That's part of his job. He gets paid enough money to have that knowledge and vision and know that that's what I need to understand. So that was the first mistake. And then I think the second one happened obviously this year with the announcement of this framework agreement, because I think to a lot of players, and this is where the word betrayal maybe comes in, and this is where I'm at a bit with Jon Rahm. I wonder if that was the turning point for John, because I do happen to believe John, everything he said up until very late, lately. And I believe him when he said he had no interest in joining LIV, and something clearly changed. And I think maybe it was that happened in June from the PGA Tour side of things that just opened the door a little bit to some players who had been otherwise very loyal to maybe say, well, hang on a minute, I don't need to be loyal to the PGA Tour at this point. And so the us against them narrative as it's not a very nice world to have to live in, but I do think on balance that it was actually working for the PGA Tour. I really do. I know they had lost some players, they'd bled some players, but very few of them were surprising. They were all outsiders, whether they're Patrick Reed or Bryson DeChambeau. They were old and past their best, as we know with some of the European players and the English players, or they had a vendetta like Phil Mickelson, and there was other kind of, I would say, greedy intentions. But there wasn't a player, apart from maybe Cameron Smith, who went. But Jon Rahm is potentially that player who could be the tipping point, and I think that's the shame. I hope I've made some sense there with those comments.
No, you have. I've got a question. Going back to your answer, which of all the players that have moved to LIV, which is the one that have surprised you the most? The move that I think, and last week we had a very interesting guest here, which I would say for me it was the one that kind of changed the picture because as you said, most of the guys that were moving, they were either past their prime or you could see it coming. Well, last week we had Joaquin Niemann, which was one of the upcoming stars. On the PGA Tour with a very bright future ahead, and we happened to have him last week here in the show. And for me, that was a huge surprise. John, for some reason, I'm not gonna say I could see it coming, but I know how friends he is with Mickelson, and they've got the same agent, and the way he talked about LIV, I don't know. It didn't surprise me as much, but it was hard for me to see somebody as Joaquin Niemann leave for LIV.
Yeah, I think any young player who was on the way up, it was a surprising move. Joaquin being one of them, Cameron Smith. Abraham Answer, a few of those guys, they were on their way up, and this has always been the thing that they've always been the biggest surprises to me. I think and I still want to believe anyway in my heart of hearts that in their heart of hearts, so I still want to believe that in their heart of hearts, they deep down know that the best competition, truly the best competition, is to be had, obviously in the 4 majors, but then at the Players Championship and the Arnold Palmer and Riviera and Wentworth. These big tournaments that are played in historic venues. I want to believe that, and I still kind of do believe that. So to me, there is still hope, and this is something that I've been trying to think about lately, rather than just portray a depressing message. It's what's the opportunity out there for the PGA Tour and the DP World Tour moving forward, so that when John's contract is up in 3 years' time, and when these contracts are finished, they have one thing's for sure: they're not going to need the money. So what the offer, the proposition that needs to be there in front of them needs to be attractive. They need to be able to look at their potential schedule and say, right, that is truly growing the game. I'm going to be playing globally. I'm going to still be playing for a lot of money. I'm going to be playing in competitive environments against the best players in the world: Scotty Scheffler, Rory McIlroy, and Cam Smith, in Australia, in Europe, in America, all around the world. This is something that I think now there's never been a more glaring opportunity for, in my opinion anyway, it's smacking the PGA Tour in the face right now to try to create something that is outside of the box. And this is where it's going to be interesting to see. And I am doubtful, because of the American influence and the kind of, the exceptionalism that obviously exists within America generally, but certainly within the PGA Tour and the American players. They're going to have to try and look outside the box if they want to try and get players like John Rahm and Cameron Smith back on side, I think, in 2 and 3 years' time.
Well, of all the things you've said, Eddie, I want to go back to the fact that obviously leadership underestimated or underrated or whatever about what the Saudis wanted to do. Obviously, Keith not listening but saying no without even thinking about what was going on, and Jay he didn't even get together with the Saudis. That was a huge mistake. And you said you didn't want you wouldn't want to be on their shoes. Well, I'd rather be on their shoes. They always finish second on the money list every year. Whatever they do, it's okay. With all, they can miss the cut every tournament and they still finish second on the money list. So I take their shoes because obviously what they've done it's quite it's been quite low profile stuff. So I'm quite disappointed, especially with Keith Pelly, which is what we are more close to. In my personal case, my brother got betrayed hard by Keith personally. I think these guys, they have too much power and they can do or undo whatever they want, and it's the job they've done. It's quite low, and I just wanted you to know. You obviously already know because you are inside, and you as you said, they've done major mistakes, but the way they handle things. If you are the most powerful tour on earth, obviously PGA Tour, you don't need those kind of fights, ban things, and do the destruction other than trying to get away with that.
Yeah, no, listen, talking specifically about Keith and the DP World Tour, I mean, one thing I would say is Keith's remit, his key performance indicators, if you like, they are twofold as far as I understand, and that is playing opportunities for the members and increased prize funds. And actually, if you go back over time, to his credit, he has been able to achieve both of those things through very difficult times and challenging circumstances. Now, that's not to say that I am in love with every decision that's been made. For example, take the selling of the naming rights of the European Tour to DP World. Now that brought in a lot of money, so that that ticks one of the boxes. It ticks one of the criteria, and I as a player benefit. We as players benefit. Keith benefits too. But ultimately, he was set those parameters by the board. He hasn't just made those up. That was the board that gave him those key performance indicators to work towards, and he has achieved them. So I think if there is any, it's easy to say criticism because no one could have foreseen everything that would have happened by the time Keith came in to say now, whether it be the pandemic and also then live stuff. But I think if something could have changed or been more, if we could have been more agile as an organization, it would have been at various times to change maybe the key performance indicators. But that's an easy thing to say. It's very challenging to do at the time. And, there's so much randomness and unpredictability with all of this. And as far as I'm aware, and the people that I've spoken to who are high up at the tour and who were privy to, frankly, all of the information and the offers that were on the table, and I trust them when they tell me, whether it was the past chairman of the tour or whoever it might be, that the PGA Tour deal was the best deal on the table. I trust them. And I think if I was in Keith's shoes, I probably would have made the same decision. And I think a lot of people would. I think it was not just a safe decision. It did offer a lot of security for its members moving forward. And listen, there are of course drawbacks, and I've been critical lately of the 10 cards, and that landed me with a lot of hot water with Keith, and he didn't like what I had to say at all about it. But listen, it's not that everything's great and rosy, but that's a traditional kind of transactional relationship, right? Unfortunately, it's Liv and their influence that kind of distort what's achievable and sustainable in the long term. And I think and also I've never really heard a cogent argument as to the counter, what could have happened with Liv and what it would have looked like. And there are so many risks that were attached with that I can, to stand up for Keith for one moment, I can understand the decision he made.
But sorry, Gonzalo, as you said, Keith has done good things, which are bringing more money and playing opportunities. That's fine. But if you do so by selling assets and not taking care of your product and building about your product, that's not a great decision, because you have more money now, but you already sold your assets, the naming. You're giving away your best players every year. That's selling assets. He sold or the DP World Tour sold 50% of the TV rights of the tour. You have more money because you've sold assets, but those assets are already gone. So it's fake money for me. But that's totally another. We could be talking about it.
I think, Larry, it's. I think we have to go a little bit back on time. I think it looks like Keith's era started when the PIF approached him, and no, if some of the paperwork that came out now after the strategic alliance, or earlier this year. The PGA Tour was considering the DP World a distressed asset. That's their actual wording. And my question is, how did we get to that point? Because that was before the strategic alliance. I know we did have a lot of struggle with the pandemic. But my question is, and I've always and I told this to the previous chairman, to David Williams at the time. I said, my feel was, and as you know, Eddie, I went to live in the US and play on the PGA Tour for a while. And then when I came back, my feel was, hey, most of the sponsors are gone, and we're kind of financing our own tournaments. We were the ones paying for our own tournaments. And yeah, the tournaments were great. We were having a lot of tournaments, and the money was great as well. At the time it was, I don't know if $2 million or $1.5 million. We had plenty of tournaments and the money was okay. But my question to David Williams at the time was, is this sustainable in time? And then, of course, the pandemic came, a strategic alliance, all that. And now financially, it looks like we are in a good situation if you look at the tournaments and the monies. But as Alex said, it's at what cost? At what cost? Not only selling our TV rights, 40% of that, which is kind of selling
your heart.
Yeah, and more importantly, and Eddie has been critical of that, and so have I. And well, Keith just has a different point of view, which is giving 10 cards away. And Eddie made a perfect example in Twitter earlier this year, where he said, well, what if you give your 10 best, you own a company, and your 10 best employees, the best guy in finance, best guy in accountancy, best guy in marketing. Boom, they go away to play to the competition, to work for the competition. At the end of the day, it's very hard to find another 10 guys every year that are gonna be playing as well as the other 10 did, and selling the TV and doing all that. So I don't know. I think we're getting ourselves in a very difficult situation. and hopefully we'll see how it goes. I mean, the only thing, I just hope to be wrong. I've always tell Keith the same thing. I mean, it's not, if I'm selfish and I'm just looking at the short term, I know that we might be fine for the next 3-4 years, and probably that's what I've got left in golf. If I've got anything left of golf in me, but I mean, I'm a big, strong defender and of the European Tour, and I want to see succeed in the long term. And I don't know if in the long term there's going to be such thing as the European Tour or DP World Tour or whatever you want to call it.
Well, yeah, I have the same concerns, and I'm actually, I think, given the decisions that have been made, that we're on the tracks, the train's kind of, there are no brakes left on it now, and that there probably isn't going to be in the medium to longer term, and we will look, it will look almost fully consolidated with the PGA Tour and look something quite different. But a few things on Keith's tenure. I mean, I remember when Keith first came out, shortly after I was on the committee, and he took on the PGA Tour. I mean, the advent of the Rolex series was to do exactly that. There was 8 of those initially, and I remember him saying in committee meetings, like, I want to give the top players, Justin Rose at the time, an option to come and play more golf in Europe. And shortly thereafter, the PGA Tour just upped all of their prize funds to $9 and $10 million. And Keith quickly realized that he could not compete financially with the PGA Tour. So, it's not as though Keith has always had this vision that we should be subservient and play second fiddle to America and the PGA Tour, because he really hasn't. He has had ambitions for this tour, but I do think he's realized and there are factors that are far beyond his control, whether it be the ease of travel in the US, the pension, the prize funds, the dollar, the strength of the currency, and the impact that's had on prize funds in the last 12, 15 years. All of those things have come together to make Keith's job as the CEO of the European Tour just that little bit harder to compete directly with the PGA Tour. So I am sympathetic to Keith and some of the, not to mention the pandemic, to some of the issues he's had to overcome. And again, I would just make the point that his remit, the key performance indicators were not set by him. As far as I'm aware, they were set by the board. And, there's the board that effectively chose to employ him via us. So, but again, that's not just, I'm just offering the other side for Keith. And I do agree with you both on the 10 cards. I think that is a real issue. And I can see the long-term problems that are going to be faced. But there are also, it should be said, on the distressed asset front. I mean, there are many, many companies, global companies like Uber, for example. I mean, they don't make any money. The European Tour has really, as far as I'm aware, never made any money. There would be, it depends how you want to define a distressed asset. It's not to say a distressed asset has no value. The European Tour still has a ton of value in many of the tournaments that it has. And it's just important that players, wherever they're playing, whether they're on LIV or the PGA Tour, they come and play their home events. That's the number one thing that's got to happen, because that continues to add huge value to those domestically. And then the other events like the Wentworths and the Scottish Opens and our big heritage events, that they still add a ton of value, and I'm sure they will do moving forward. So listen, that's kind of how I see and feel it. But if I had to make a prediction about where things will end up in the medium to longer term, I would be surprised if we were not entirely swallowed up by the PGA Tour and consolidated, and then there was something that, some of our best events became part of, their big thing, and then there was maybe a layer below that. Now, that's not to say that can't be worked out in a way that's still compelling and, has many opportunities for players. It just would look quite different, and it would certainly be sad to the guys like us who really value the history of the European Tour. Now, that's just a prediction. That's not saying, I hope I'm wrong to your point there, Gonzalo.
No, I like what you said about playing national opens, and I know this year you were critical of the English players that didn't come to play the British Masters, which I agree. On my times in the committee, I spent 8 years of the committee. We were very strong on that, and actually it was one of the conditions. Of keeping your membership was that you had to play your national open, because I think that's crucial, and we are concerned. I mean, I think one of the big losers of John moving to LIV is the Spanish Open. Of course, the Valderrama event is going to get only bigger. now that John is there. But I mean, my big concern is what's going to happen with the Spanish Open if Ram is not there. So I think it's we have to emphasize a lot of that. How important is that Rory comes to the Irish? How important that, I mean, because the likes of Tyrrell Hatton and Justin and all those, they come play the British Masters and Wentworth. I mean, that's what the locals want to see. They want to see their heroes. I mean, their national players playing in their Open, and that's absolutely, because that's the heart of the European Tour is their national Opens. The Spanish Open, I mean, the Dutch Open, well, maybe the British Masters is not an English Open anymore, but the Scottish, the Irish, I mean, that's the heart and soul of the European Tour, and we can't let those die like we did, for example, with the Portuguese Open, or maybe the Italian Open. And what's going to happen with the Italian Open now that the Ryder Cup is over? We know what's going to happen. You know, that tournament slowly is going to get smaller and smaller. I mean, it's
French
a shame.
Open.
Or French Open. I mean, French Open is probably the perfect example.
Yeah, it is. The French Open, I will say, was, even when I remember playing in 2017 and 16 in the Rolex Series, it was never that well supported. I've always found that slightly odd with France. But, obviously Italy, when Francesco has played in the past, particularly thinking of times in Monza, it's been fantastic. Francesco didn't play this year in Rome, and there wasn't much of an atmosphere. So I completely agree. And I know Keith completely agrees as well, the importance of getting the home players to play the home tournaments. That is... He is fully on board with that, and he's working hard. And I would suspect, actually, that one of the things that will happen post John going to Live is there will be some sort of arrangement where the Live players can play the DP World Tour event, but they have to play their home. Maybe they can only play their home event if it doesn't clash. For instance, I know Thomas Peters has just been announced to play Belgium next year, which I thought was interesting, and maybe suggested to me something had been said behind the scenes. Now, I know Belgium this year clashed with the Live event. Obviously, it doesn't next year, and maybe there's nothing John can do about that. It may have been a condition with John signing, though. I mean, we know how much he loves playing in Madrid at the Spanish Open. I would have thought that maybe there would be something in that Live contract condition that says, no, I want to be able to play my Spanish Open. And I think that Keith will bend over backwards to allow that to happen, because we've all seen that event the last few years, because of John, has just been magnificent. I love going to Madrid in that tournament, and I hope John's there next year. Fully hope he's there next year. And
you played well there this year, and you kind of saved your car. I mean, I know it's been a bit of a struggle this year for you, but that was a good week for you. Even though, I mean, they still show in that pool on 17, which ended up being.
I thought you were going to say you saved par from the toilets. That's why I smiled. Yeah.
Well, that was a hell of a week for you. I know. I mean, you didn't have the best of the Sundays, but overall a good week that kind of helped you save your card. I mean, because Eddie, let's talk about a bit about your golf. I mean, you I think, if I don't remember badly, you got on tour. Is it 2014? 2014 was kind of your full year on tour.
2013.
That's it. And that's what the time when I moved to Miami, so we didn't get to play that much together, and it took you a while to win, but then it came 2018. You won Qatar, you won the British Masters, which at the time, well, still is, but I mean, it was the time that when Justin Rose was hosting at Walton Heath, one of my favorite courses in England. And then what's happened since, Eddie? I mean, I don't know. There's been injuries. Of course, we had the pandemic. It's how's your game going, and how are you feeling going forward to getting into 2024?
Yeah, well, I had a back injury at the end of 2018, and that set me back a bit. I mean, I had some good results at the start of 2019, but it was really, that was entirely off of confidence. I think I wonder what you think about this as a fellow golfer, but I've always thought that what tends to lead good performance is your skill set, and then you perform well, and your confidence comes at the end, and then you have this period where you have this Goldilocks moment where everything's great, but then actually when the form dips, the confidence and the expectations stay high. And I think some of my good results in 2019 was simply just because my expectations of myself and my confidence was so high, but my skill set wasn't nearly the same as it was at late 2017 and 2018. And then the pandemic came, and I didn't pick a club up for 2 months, and that was the worst thing that I've ever done. Because when I next picked a club up, and all I did was train physically, and when I next picked a club up, my backswing was, it was the 20 degrees shorter, and then as a consequence of that, I just started building in these terrible downswing kind of habits, pulling really aggressively with the club and losing body shape. And frankly, it's just taken me a hellishly long time to kind of overcome what's been built in from that period onwards. Now, I will say, I think that I'm slowly getting there. And, we moved house a year ago. We put a simulator in maybe 9 months ago in my house. So I'm working more than I've ever worked on my swing. And I'm actually really enjoying that. I'm not seeing a coach at the moment. Haven't been since July, so 6 months or so. But I'm kind of enjoying that process. I'm looking at my swing, and it could go one of two ways. And if it goes badly, then I'll have to maybe ask Alex for some advice, because I know how good a job you do with Pablo. I think you work with Pablo. But it's at the moment I still feel like next year I'm going to put the driver back in. So that's the other feature of my game that's been a thing.
I was gonna say
Yeah.
you're playing the mini driver as last time I saw you were using that tailor-made mini driver. Still using that one?
Well, no, I'm not. I put a driver in Qatar. So there's one thing that I found, which I think is it's the first thing I've ever found in my career that I can really rely on to give me a feeling that I can trust with a driver, and that's the Pro Sender. And I don't hit balls with it, but I just set it in my right arm, and I just stand there, and I kind of in transition just try and get my right wrist to really lay down into the cup of the Pro Sender, so that, as you could imagine, you're sort of shallowing it with your wrists, and you're keeping the mass of the club just way back, way behind you. And that's the only thing I've found in my whole career up to this point so I'm quite excited about that, because I think that's a very playable feel for me, and it's going to be able to get me in play, 10, 15 yards further up the fairway. And then if I'm swinging well from there, my iron play is what kind of, is what is my strength. So I'm still confident that 24 could be a very good year for me. And I need it. Well, I kind of need it to be, because it gets me away from thinking negatively about the game, and just kind of, I really am at a place now, probably a bit like Rory, although nearly as good, where I just want to focus on my golf and play good golf, because we all know that's what makes us happy, isn't it?
Hey Eddie, I mean, I know you were playing in Australia last few weeks. You went there. We are here. I've never been a big fan of having simultaneous tournaments on tour, I mean, the same week. But I know you played in South Africa, you've played in Australia. Larry and I were having this discussion a few weeks back. I mean, what is better? What would we do if we had the chance of playing both? How was your experience? And I mean, because we have the feel from the outside, the courses seem to be better in Australia. The crowd seemed to be a little better. I don't know about the competition. I think there were a few more international players there. I don't know, but I wanna hear your thoughts on that, because I mean, we are big fans of playing in Oz. Nothing against South Africa, by the way. Nothing against South Africa. It's just the altitude and the Kikuyu grass and the South African win there. I mean, it's nothing against South African golf. It's just I like Australian golf a little better.
Yeah, it was my first time to Australia, so that was kind of why I wanted to go. I had never been there before, so to go to Brisbane was great, but to go to Sydney was just incredible. I could not believe what a city Sydney is. It's quickly become my favorite place, and I can't wait to go back there, really. And actually missing the cut was kind of a godsend, because me and Jen just got to spend the weekend sightseeing, and then we stayed on for 4 days in Bondi Beach the week after. So we had such a good time, and I would definitely go back in the future, hopefully. I think next year that event might be in Melbourne, actually. So it might go Brisbane, Melbourne. So I'll definitely try and go back if I can for that. But no, I on balance, I would say that Australia, it would be somewhere I would rather play than South Africa. I mean, I've never played well down in Africa generally. And I think for me, being, I remember playing in a WGC in Mexico, of all places, on the final day with Bryson DeChambeau and Alex Noren. And we were all, and this was at the time when we were all playing quite well, and especially Bryson and Alex, they were tremendous players, but we were all playing shit. Sorry if I can't swear on this podcast, but we were really struggling.
Proper language on this program.
Right, okay. And I was watching us all, and we were all quite steep into the ball, and we were hitting our irons all over the place, and they had Kikuyu grass in Mexico, Chapultepec, I think it was called. And I just said to them, I said, guys, do you struggle on this type of grass historically? And Alex said, well, other than his win at the Ned Bank, he's never played well in Africa, and Bryson just couldn't deal with it. And so I think for me, being quite steep into the ball, Kikuyu grass is a disaster, because I end up hitting a groove high, so then I lose my distance, and then I respond to that and lose my body shape, and then start hitting pulls and all sorts. I just respond to the ground conditions in such a bad way, whereas at least in Australia with the tighter turf, it kind of matches and mirrors a better general pattern of movement for me. So yeah, that's a very specific example as to why Australia might be better for me. But I loved Australia. I can't wait to go back.
I've never played golf in Australia. I've been to Sydney. It's an amazing city. I cannot agree more. The best burger I've ever had, Bondi Beach. Don't ask me why. I mean, you would think the best hamburger you will have it in the US. No. Bondi Beach, best burger I've ever had. Only bad thing is the taxes. I mean, when you play there, they take away 50%. But hey, we don't play for money, do we, Eddie?
I get the impression you don't like tax, Gonzalo.
No, I don't like tax. Full stop. Yeah. Period. I like reasonable tax. I mean, I'll be willing to pay 20%. I'll be willing. That's probably one of the things that Trump did the best when he got into office. I mean, 20% tax. That's what we paid when I was in the US. I thought that I would be more than happy to pay 20. I mean, over that, I think it's kind of a stealing. But yeah, I'm not a fan on taxes. I have to admit that. Hey Eddie, other thing. Let's change subjects. I mean, we don't want to keep you much longer. But I mean, of course, I know you don't watch Leaf Golf, but I mean, I know there's probably, if there's one tournament you're not going to miss, and it's Ryder Cup. We had an amazing Ryder Cup in Rome. We all. I mean, we can disagree that. We can agree that Luke made an exceptional job, but to be honest, I'm quite surprised that he took the captaincy for Bethpage. I think I don't know. I think the rotation in captains have worked nicely for Europe, and also thinking I think he has probably more to lose than to win. Huh? What's your take on that?
Yeah, he probably. Well, you would imagine. Well, no, he does have stuff to gain, because if they go out there and win, and it's deemed that his captaincy was a defining factor, then he's going to be selling books and speeches for years to come, more than Paul McGinley is. So, it can really work for him.
He'll get hair as well. So same as Paul, he'll get a new some more hair.
But I suspect. Maybe there's a degree of politics involved from the tour to try and keep Luke on, given the players that are on live. And, I hope it's not too crude a thing to say, but just to keep guys like Lee Westwood and Poulter and Sergio away from the captaincy, who I think we would all agree deserve it on merits. But obviously, with everything that's happened, it's unlikely at this point. So I think I don't think it's a bad thing necessarily that a player, if they sign up in future for the Ryder Cup captaincy, that they may be expected to do a home and away. I think that's actually quite a good. It's obviously a huge commitment, and Luke put a lot into it, as we know. And I'm sure I know there's a significant monetary incentive to do it as well. So, which probably has gone up this time around for Luke. So I'm sure it's worth his while financially as well.
No, for sure. I just think that I'm a strong believer. If ain't broken, don't fix it. I mean, I think the rotation, changing captains every 2 years, it seemed to be working for Europe. I know we've struggled the last couple of away matches. And don't get me wrong. I mean, I think he did a phenomenal job, and I'm sure he's going to do the same at Bethpage, even though it's a kind of hostile place to go. But in a way, he doesn't have anything to lose, because it's going to be difficult to retain the trophy. But on the other hand, I was thinking, I don't know. I mean, when you've done so well, it's going to be complicated to match what he's achieved in Rome, which has been
Well, I think Bethpage is going to be an interesting venue. I know in the past the Americans have set up their courses to suit them, and we've kind of done the same. But I mean, I only played Bethpage in the 2019 PGA, and I didn't make a birdie for 2 days. Now, there could have been no rough on that course, and I don't think I would have made many birdies. I mean, it is such a demanding golf course, and I don't think there's a way you can set that course up that makes it particularly favorable to the American golfers. I think that whichever way you set that up, it's going to favor great ball striking, is what I'm trying to say. And I think we would all agree that the top echelons of the upper echelons of the European players seem to have that edge. So with Ludwig, obviously still going to be there in the next couple of years' time. Victor, Tommy, Rory, John, obviously, super strong team, tee to green. So I do think we've got a very good chance, apart from the fact that the crowd is obviously going to be brutal.
It is indeed. It is indeed. Hey Eddie, and last but not least, what's your take on the rollback? Are you for it? Are you against it? I mean, here we've got mixed feelings. I'm all for the rollback. Larry not so much. But I mean, we're asking every guest we've got here in the show. We want to ask them. I think honestly, I mean, in my opinion, I think it's a step on the right direction, but it's not enough. I think it has to do with changing the size of the drivers and probably the sweet spot of the drivers being too big and too permissive. But what do you think about it?
Yeah. So last year when I was on the committee, we had a presentation to us from the RNA and from Titleist. And during the RNA presentation, they told us something quite interesting, which I didn't know, that 2 years ago at the Alfred Dunhill Links, they tested with a driver that had a massively reduced or a much reduced MOI, and so a smaller sweet spot. And this is with a standard ball. And what they found is when players missed the middle, it went 30 yards less far. And so, you know, when I discovered that, I thought that, in my opinion, forget the kind of, for a moment, park the, you know, how easy is it to do, forget the kind of practicalities of it for a moment. From the standpoint of, if I'm a viewer, if I'm watching a player under pressure and they start to miss the center of the club face, which we kind of know invariably happens, and they start to have 20 yards, 30 yards less, you know, less far off the tee, that is quite compelling TV. And you're really starting to see the effects of not hitting the middle of the club face. And so I agree entirely with you that I think something should be done with the clubs as well as the ball. And I do think that they are looking into the clubs as well. And I, you know, I agree that I don't think it was enough. You know, I was a bit extreme maybe with it when I spoke to Steve Otto from the RNA, and I said, if I were you, I would roll it all back, and I would take 10%, close to 10% off the ball, because by the time 2028 comes around, every kid's going to be swinging it at 120. And that 7 yards, that 8 yards or 15 yards is going to become 5 or 6 yards. And that's nothing, quite frankly. So, you know, you might as well roll it more back now. That was my feedback on it. And obviously, you know, understandably, maybe they've not listened to that. But I'm with you. I do think there needs to be a rollback. And for the simple and principal reason for me is that I just want to see more guys hit 14 clubs more regularly in golf rounds. I think that the skill from hitting a driver to a 6-iron to a pitching wedge, they're all 3 different skills. And the best golfers through time have been, generally speaking, the guys who have been able to do all of those 3 things in equal measure, and they've been dominant. And we shouldn't be trying to have a game where you can dominate by just hitting the driver and the short irons and never have to hit mid and long irons. So, you know, we do need to make sure, without courses going to 8,000 yards long, that we can do that. And so I'm for the rollback generally.
Team gone, Larry.
No, Gonzalo, don't be stupid. Eddie is saying exactly what I said. I mean, the proposal or the rollback they are proposing now is totally useless. In 2028, it will make no difference. So making all this move for nothing because you are trying to assess something that is 0.5% of the people that plays golf, and if you try to address that amount of players and it will be useless, it's not a good idea. If you don't change drivers or you don't change the spin on the ball, it's the rollback is totally useless. It won't hurt. It won't hurt as they say to the amateur players, because I'm an amateur player, and for me the ball flying 5 yards less or 6 yards less is nothing, because if I hit it a little bit, if I hit a mishit just a fraction, I lose all those meters. And if the ball goes less far, I won't how do you say it, Gonzalo? Lose so many balls. So it's a good move for me.
A win-win. A win-win.
Win-win situation. But the rollback that they are proposing is totally useless. If they don't change the woods and the spin on the ball, nothing. So, for me, as an spectator, I would like to see the ball spinning more. If the ball spins more, the mishits go right and left, and that's what makes the golf more interesting. Other than hitting all the clubs on your back, as you said, Eddie, watching the people struggling a bit sideways, it's very important for the enjoyment of the game.
And so when Titleist presented, again, that was one of the things they said. They said that if the ball changes, we will be changing all of our clubs to accommodate this new ball, and we will be working towards lower spin options to suit you guys as professionals. And so again, given that they were going to change the clubs anyway, just by changing the ball, why not change the clubs? Why not add in? And the thing I would say, and this goes back to the kind of unintended consequences and things you can't foresee. We had to give our feedback to the RNA about the bifurcation, the model local rule, and we agreed with the PGA Tour that it wasn't right. Now, in turn, what comes back is a rollback for everybody. Now, I don't actually think on balance that that's better than the bifurcation, the option to bifurcate and the model local rule. And so, the pressure that was applied, I think, by, frankly, the manufacturers on those players, all of the players, and I think the tours was significant during that period, and that would have had a huge impact on the decision making as well. So I just wanted to add that in.
Yeah, no. I mean, I agree. It's drivers. I mean, the driver size must be changed, and especially the sweet spot. I keep telling the same. Going back to the Spanish Open at Club de Campo on 15, I hit my driver and I hit it so far on the toe. I think I've never mishit a ball so badly on the toe. I kid you not, if I had a persimmon driver, I probably would have missed the ball and definitely hit somebody in the crowds like 20 yards away. This thing went to the middle of the fairway, literally middle of the fairway, as if nothing happened. If I hadn't told nobody, or there wasn't even that T mark on the club face, nobody would have known. I mean, I think I've almost missed the ball. That's how bad it was. It was right in the middle of the fairway.
See, I hit it on the motorway there. That shows how bad I am.
Well, you're not the first. You're not the first to hit that motorway. So Eddie, hey, listen, I thought this. I mean, I promised you it was going to be the last one, but I forgot we haven't talked about world ranking points. I mean, and that subject, it's the one that matters, especially to the European Tour players. I mean, actually, I had an exchange with your brother Pablo and Bob McIntyre, who were both complaining about the world ranking points. That has been especially the ones that are given to the European Tour events now, that since they changed the way they are distributed, and it's hard to believe. I mean, Louis Oosthuizen, who's won 2 weeks ago, back-to-back weeks, he just made 25. I think he made like 25 or 26 points, winning 2 back-to-back tournaments. While Scottish Scheffler winning the Hero made 30. I mean, in a 30-man event with no cut. I mean, what are we doing wrong, Eddie, when it comes to world ranking? I think that's something that it's really setting us a little bit behind the PGA Tour. I mean, it's very difficult to people like, let's say, your brother, for example, who won twice this year and is not even close to getting to the top 50 in the world. Or Campillo, I mean, guys that actually have played really well on the European Tour, and it's very difficult to crack in the top 50 nowadays with the current system.
It is, and it's all designed seemingly to get the guys to go play in America on the PGA Tour at the moment. Now, it should be said, however, that the decisions that are made at the World Golf Rankings, they have been Jay Monahan and as has Keith Pelley, they've often abdicated from making those types of decisions, so because of conflicts of interest. So they are working I mean, if you speak to Eduardo Molinari, who's obviously really the go-to kind of guy on a lot of this stuff, he's assured me that in time they will accurately reflect the standard of golf that is played on both tours. Now I still have my concerns about that, and I do know that the guys from the DP World Tour have been going back to the World Golf Rankings and saying, listen, are we sure this is right? Do we not need to be making any amendments to this, because it doesn't seem to quite be right? And I think this is maybe an example of one of those things where sometimes it's best for the overall global game to offer up something that maybe isn't quite fair. If the DP World Tour are set to benefit by the tune of 10 to 20% to keep things kind of more on an even keel, or to reflect the global nature of the game, then to me that's a better evil than having what we have right now, where we have this massive disequilibrium, if you like, and unequal outcomes with the world ranking points. I don't think it's right. I don't really like it. I hope that something changes, or I hope that Eduardo is correct, and over 2 years and beyond, we get to see this thing fully played out. But there are clearly some peculiarities with it that don't quite add up.
I have to say, Eduardo always tends to be right in the long term. So we'll give. I hate to admit it, but he most of the time he's right. Hey Eddie, I can't thank you enough for being with us, especially in such a special program, our first English speaking podcast. So thanks for that. I mean, I really appreciate it. I think you are not only an amazing player, but a guy that it's always fun to talk to. You are not only intelligent, but you are articulated and critical and vocal. I mean, I like you because you are never afraid of speaking your mind, and that's something that I really appreciate on people. So thanks for. I think I speak on behalf of the three of us when I thank you very especially for tonight, and we will be following you, and we'll wish you the very best for 2024. I'm sure that it's gonna be a great year, and we'll be following your success, not only as a player, but also as a podcaster and a Twitter maniac.
Thanks, guys. No, I appreciate the chat, and have a good Christmas. And I'll see you both in the new year. And Alex, if I'm struggling with my swing, then I'll try and come maybe tap you on the shoulder and ask for some advice.
That'll be an honor, Eddie, an honor coming from you. When are we going to see Eddie Pepperell, chairman of the Players Committee?
I'm afraid it's less likely than ever. I'm not even on the committee anymore, so that is a story. That is a story.
We're gonna start here as supporting Eddie for chairman of the committee.
Make like a landing page, yeah,
like a Trump message. I'm Eddie Pepperell and I support this message, something like that. We're gonna start a campaign, a proper campaign from Golf Sin Etiquetas.
Yeah. When you say the things, the truths, and you are a pain in the ass for the people, they tend to take the good people out of the committees. It happened the same for me in my home club. So I was in the committee, and they took me out because I was a little bit pain in the ass trying to improving things. So maybe that you are out of the committee. It's a good. It speaks good things about you.
Well, I should say that I was the one that came off it. I was not forced out, but obviously there is context to that, which I'm sure we can talk about in person. But
it's a weird committee. The committee. I mean, I've spent a lot of time there, and it's amazing. I mean, you try to do things for the tour, and then I mean, most of the time you walk out of the committee thinking, was that a waste of time? I mean, because most of the things you want to change, then you can change, or somebody has the last word. I mean, and then Keith or the CEO or whoever is at the time, I mean, can change things at their. It's tough. It's quite depressing, I have to say. But hey, we need strong leadership. It's difficult times, and somebody like Eddie would definitely make a hell of a difference. Anyway, Eddie, as I said, best of luck. I know you're starting the season in Dubai. We'll be following closely, and again, thanks on behalf of Golf Sin Etiquetas for being here with us.
Thanks for having me, guys. See you soon. Look forward to it.
Thank you, Eddie. Take care. Good Christmas.
Bueno, Larry, pues aquí está el primer programa de Golf Sin Etiquetas en inglés. No sé cómo. Yo he visto tu inglés un poquito mejor que tu approach, ¿eh? Y eso que tu approach, telita.
No sé, Gonzalo, o sea, no sé cómo explicarlo. O sea, lo has dicho muy bien al principio. Yo soy una persona a la que sigo atentamente en Twitter porque es no solo sensato, sino que comunica francamente bien y además tiene muchas similitudes con nosotros. O sea, no hay etiquetas. Es mucho más educado probablemente que yo la mayoría de las veces, pero es un tío que habla bien, que habla sin tapujos y para mí no había mejor entrevista para empezar el sector inglés. Sí que podría haber sido más mediático quizá, pero como comunicador y como persona que habla claro y que está muy metido en el mundo y que ama el golf como nosotros, para mí era la entrevista perfecta y creo que ha ido bien. A mí me ha gustado, ha sido fluido. Él habla como siempre muy bien y tú has estado enorme con tu inglés de Oxford, impecable.
No, de Oxford es Eddie. Yo soy de aquí de Chamberí, pero bueno.
No, pero tu inglés es muy british. Así que fenomenal, Gonzalo. Has estado estelar.
Podía hablar era un poco muy amero, esa mezcla de español e inglés también lo podía haber sacado, que ese también lo conozco.
A mí solo se me ha quedado una pregunta en el tintero que me apetecía, pero como tú siempre cierras los programas sin avisarme, pues me quedo sin. Y era preguntarle por su precio. Todos tenemos un precio.
Y unos más baratos que otros, Larry.
Sin duda, sí. Sin duda. Tú y yo viajamos a la escuela, él también tiene un precio. Era una pregunta que me hacía gracia hacerle, pero bueno, tampoco era muy relevante. Así que para mí, estelar, Eddie Pepperell, siempre. Soy muy fan de su golf. Es un tío que siempre me ha gustado ver. Y obviamente, como comunicador, me parece que tiene un futuro brillante. Yo creo que cuando el golf le deje de responder, por ahí tiene un filón importante.
Sin duda. Para la gente que no le conocía, bueno, Eddie Pepperell, por supuesto, 2 veces ganador del European Tour, ganó en el 2018 el Qatar Masters y el British Masters, y como bien dice Larry, un tipo inteligente y sobre todo que comunica muy bien, y le pueden seguir, yo recomiendo para seguirlo en Twitter, es muy divertido, y luego en un podcast que ha empezado hace no mucho, pero con dos profesionales, con Ian Carter y con Andrew Cotter, que es también es muy cachondo, que se llama The Chipping Forecast. Así que nada, Larry. Bueno, este ha sido nuestro pequeño regalo de Navidad. No sé, oye, a lo mejor hay gente que lo puede considerar un regalo, hay gente que lo puede considerar un castigo, pero bueno, a veces los reyes te traen regalos, a veces te traen carbón. O sea que...
Escucha, y a Eddie para acabar le gustan los perros, que tiene igual que yo 2.
Y tiene un braco alemán como el mío, tiene un Bisla y un braco alemán como yo.
Le gustan los perros, el buen vino y el chocolate. O sea, es que podría ser mi mejor amigo claramente. En este caso, Gonzalo no te supera en valores, pero en afinidades de gustos, desde luego que sí. Porque tener un compañero amigo abstemio, no veo.
A mí el chocolate y los perros me gustan, que no me gusta el vino. Si hace falta para ser más amigo tuyo, soy capaz.
Bueno, para eso está tu mujer ahí siempre apoyándonos en casa, o sea que bueno, no está mal.
Bueno, Larry, esto ha sido un programa grabado, así que, bueno, obviamente a lo mejor han pasado cosas esta última semana que obviamente pues que no hemos podido meter en contexto y en la entrevista. Esperemos que no. Esta semana previa a Navidad ahora resulta que se va a unir va a salir la unión del PIF y del PGA Tour y tal, y nos manda todo al carajo. Pero bueno.
Has estado estelar también jugando con los tiempos, no sé, por nuestro invitado la semana pasada, porque claro, ahora sabemos que mañana tenemos a jugar con Iman, pero cuando vea esto la gente no sabe, un lío de cojones, ¿no? Yo me podría haber hecho un lío de pelotas.
Fenomenalmente hecho, así que nada, pero la semana que viene tenemos programa en directo. El 1 de enero vamos a empezar el año con programa en directo y vamos un poco a hacer recapitulación de todo lo ocurrido en este 2023 y hagamos, ¿por qué no? Juguemos a hacer predicciones también para el 2024, que ese sea nuestro primer programa del año, otra vez con público en directo, otra vez con vuestras preguntas y bueno, espero que perdonéis esta pequeña vacación que nos hemos tomado hoy día de Navidad, pero entendíamos que logísticamente era más sencillo si hacíamos un programa grabado. Así que nada, Larry, te aprovecho para desearte muy feliz Navidad y nada, que nos vemos ya en el 2024.
Vale, Gonzalo, feliz Navidad a todos, gracias.
Gracias por escucharnos y bueno, y este será nuestro último programa de 2023, que espero que les haya gustado y lo hayan pasado tan bien como lo hemos hecho nosotros. Así que, Larry, hasta el 2024, si Dios quiere.
Hasta luego.